Are we addicted to music? Well, that's a question as old as time, or at least as old as the first person who couldn't stop listening to I Will Always Love You on repeat. But don't panic. Fortunately, your love for music is nothing worth taking to your therapist about, and mostly healthy. So if that answers the question for you, then I guess you could click off. But please don't. That would be mean. It turns out we have our ancestors to thank for our musical inclinations. Back in the day, our ancestors didn't have Spotify or Apple Music to listen to, but they still found ways to make music without auto-tune. Researchers believe that music evolved as a way to communicate emotions and social information, and that our ancestors likely used music to bond and communicate with one another without auto-tune, which still surprises me. Our love for music all comes down to one chemical released in the brain called dopamine, also known as the feel-good chemical, that is responsible for producing feelings of pleasure and happiness. It's like a little cheerleader in your brain rooting for you, and I'm not talking about a monkey with cymbals. More specifically, the release of dopamine occurs in response to the anticipation and experience of pleasurable stimuli. In the context of music, this can manifest as the anticipation of a particularly satisfying melody or the pleasure of hearing a favorite song, no matter what that song may be. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging have identified the ventral striatum and the nucleus accumbens as key regions involved in the processing of musical pleasure and reward. These brain areas are part of the mesolimbic dopamine system, which is responsible for mediating the experience of reward and reinforcement. Moreover, the release of dopamine in response to music can vary depending on individual preferences and musical experiences. For instance, if you play an instrument, or like to think you're playing an instrument whilst in the shower, then you may exhibit stronger dopamine responses to musical stimuli compared to non-musicians. Different types of music may elicit distinct patterns of dopamine release, with some genres or styles being more effective at eliciting pleasurable responses in certain individuals. This variability underscores the complex and multifaceted nature of the brain's response to music and the importance of considering individual differences when studying this phenomenon. So, can music be considered an addiction? Well, listening or playing music can activate different regions of the brain, like the emotional and reward centers. That's why some people might feel like they can't get enough of certain songs or artists. Fortunately, this is one of those healthy addictions and not that one that your friend claims they could quit if they wanted to. And while it's not a recognized medical condition, some people might feel a compulsive need to listen to music and experience negative emotions when they can't. But don't worry, music addiction is a pretty harmless thing compared to some other addictions out there. As long as you're not neglecting your responsibilities or harming yourself or others, there's nothing wrong with getting a little lost in the rhythm every now and then. Okay, now that we know your music addiction is actually quite healthy, it's time to get drunk on it and reap the benefits. You might have heard of something called the Mozart effect, which suggests that listening to classical music can help with things like memory, focus, and creativity. While the idea that listening to Mozart can make you smarter has been debunked, there is some evidence to suggest that music can have a positive effect on our brains. For example, listening to calming music can help reduce stress and anxiety, while listening to upbeat music can boost our mood and energy levels. And if you're trying to exercise, listening to some music with a BPM that is aligned with the intensity of exercise you're doing can actually improve your performance. Music stimulates the part of the brain that controls movement, so it helps your body complete repetitive movements more efficiently. This synchronization increases your heart rate, metabolism, and energy efficiency, while also reducing blood pressure and physical and mental stress. So next time you're trying to get through a tough workout or focus on a difficult task, try putting on some music and see how it affects you. And if you're already a music addict, don't worry, you're in good company. Some of the greatest minds in history were obsessed with music, from Albert Einstein to Ludwig van Beethoven. So go ahead, indulge your musical cravings, and enjoy all the benefits that music has to offer. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm starting to crave some Whitney Houston.